Hello there folks, Halo here, and welcome to my Spark Inquisitor duo guide for Path of Exile Crucible League. Overall, as a whole, this duo setup has come out much stronger this patch. There were nerfs to Spark, and we've compensated for them in several ways, largely by making improvements to the Spark Inquisitor build itself. But on top of that, the Aurabot came out way ahead this patch. The mastery changes were actually a net positive, massive positive actually. Some of the new masteries are insane. The build has been massively improved, the Aurabot itself, and you'll see that in the guide once it comes out in a couple hours. But yeah, big win. This is the strongest league ever to play a duo setup. Before I get into the guide, I just want to say you should check out the Discord. There's a link in the description. There's over 4,400 people in it now, which is outpacing the amount of subs the YouTube channel has. The Discord is an awesome place. It's a crucial resource for getting help, asking questions, getting farming strats, even finding people to play with. There's a lot of people who are looking for group there. So yeah, check it out. It's quickly growing to become an awesome community of people. All right, on to the scope of what this video is. This is not a full guide from the ground up. We really wanted to do really nice, highly edited guides along with the wiki that we're working on to house extra content for the guides, but it turned out that the PoBs, this league needed a lot of time to cook. We kind of redid everything from the ground up, did several passes, did lots of tweaks, lots of refinements to everything, and that just ended up taking an enormous amount of time. The league starts in like 17 hours, 18 hours, so we're just trying to get the guides out as quick as possible. So we're not going to cover all the basics of the build. You know, if you want to know things like why we run Petrified Blood with Pain Attunement, the previous guides are still completely applicable for that. On to talking about some of the specific changes this patch. The big change was 25% reduced projectile speed to Spark. Now, across the board, we've picked up more projectile speed to compensate for that, so you should have about the same amount. And it didn't cost us a ton to do that because tweaking things elsewhere has kept the power level of those changes pretty much the same. The freeze duration cluster here is gone. We don't have the freeze duration or the mastery. Now this is really only a problem for the budget in-game setup, like the old 200C setup, where you first are able to do like in-game bosses and such, because later on, we didn't run the freeze nodes anyway on the high budget setup, because you just hit so hard that even without any freeze duration, you're still freezing like uber bosses. So, you know, once you can do that, then freeze duration becomes a pretty useless stat. There's a couple of ways you can compensate for the freeze duration nerfs. One is to swap out Pinpoint for Spell Echo. So you can see our average hit is 8 million on this setup here. If we swap in Spell Echo and, you know, our average hit drops down to 4.8 million. Now, you should still use Spell Echo when you're just progressing maps because ramping intensity will feel a little bit bad. But if you're doing any kind of content where you're worried about not freezing enemies, just run intensity, the intensity mastery here with Pinpoint. You can swap those in and out. They're the same jewel socket. Like if you're rushing early invitations, you should probably use you should be using Pinpoint anyways for that. So not a big deal. We can still get 20% cold duration here off this point and 20% off elemental focus. So completely fine. Not a bad deal for us at all. The Arcane Surge change, we lost 10% spell damage, but we got a bit of cast speed. A little bit of a nerf, not really a big deal. And then the leveling changes, we lost the Vindercraft flat damage on Scepters or Wands, as well as the attack speed on Scepters were nerfed. So personally, I wouldn't really use Frostblink with Leap Slam. I just use Flame Dash, and so that's what's in the guide. You can still do it if you want, but it's a little bit slower and not so much powerful compared to Flame Dash as it used to be. So it's a little bit more preference now. We've got the leveling tree has been adjusted, so we'll start at the leveling tree and work through from there. It's pretty much the same. You go to get your Inquisitor nodes, you get some life, cast speed, and you take this wheel, even though it doesn't have the non-crits or lucky. It's completely fine. As you progress, the tree changes. We lost the 15% elemental resist mastery on Ashfrost and Storm, But honestly, that was just kind of a comfort pick anyways. You can just like craft resist on gear, spend a minute or two doing that, and you'll be completely fine. Also, the 15% maximum life if there are no life modifiers in equipped body armor feels really nice while leveling, because usually you're just running with whatever has links that you need. Crew Reward is still the best in slot amulet for leveling. You don't have to pick this up, but if you have a couple Chaos, it is always a good purchase. Once we reach the next leveling threshold, and I still have to sync all of these numbers together. I'll do that after recording. I swap out of Orb of Storms here. Once you're about level 45-50, you kind of just have enough damage that you're killing things. So spending the time to drop Orb of Storms and dealing with the limited range feels pretty bad. So what we can do is run Wave of Conviction with Physical to Lightning, Controlled Destruction, and Overcharge, which means you have an enormous hit that also gives you lightning exposure. And this basically caps out your 65% crits, or 65% shocks that you get from the mastery here. It feels really nice to use. You can still use Orb of Storms if you want, but I like the Wave of Conviction setup personally. You can even do both if you're so inclined. Winds of Change, this is a item that I believe only drops from the 3rd tier of lab. It might also drop from Uber, but I think it's only the 3rd tier lab, the Merciless one. This item is by no means necessary, and not a ton of them exist, so I don't know how available it'll be, but I've bought this item on League Start playing Spark for like a Chaos or two, and to get that projectile speed, the projectile damage, and life on a unique like this feels absolutely amazing. By no means necessary, but I just wanted to put it there as something you can watch for. Another change to the way we do leveling is we swap to crit as soon as we hit early maps. The reason we do this is because you don't have the mastery that you used to rely on. So it used to be a little bit more, you swap over once you feel like you need more damage. Here we just do it right away. The tree has adjusted to account for that. So you notice we're using crit gems here in the early mapping setup. Onto the budget endgame, I've tried to make the Annihilating Light setup feel a lot better. This item is insane. It gives you just as much damage as 90% capped resistance dual-wield Nebulises. Triple damage is just an insane number. The main thing that you need to be concerned with Annihilating Light, it is completely fine to cap your resistances by either having flasks up or being near your Aurabot, right? If one of those two things aren't true, you're going to die anyways, no matter what, basically. So relying on having at least one of them up to be resistance capped is completely fine. However, what you absolutely want to avoid is if we go to here where the configuration shows the resists that we're getting from our Aurabot, if we turn off the extra resists we're getting, you can see we drop down to about 50-58% resistances. Now, with our flask up, with our Ruby Flask active, we are still basically capped. 73%, you can get a little bit more. This body armor is absolutely terrible, right? There's lots of room to just add more resists to the character. But the main thing you want to avoid is you turn off your flasks, or you can just stand next to your Aurabot without flask slips and see what you have. You need to be capped resistances. You need to have resistances capped at the Aurabot's purity level, so it'll be 83% at this point in the progression cycle, without your flasks active. You don't want to rely. It's okay to rely on flask or Aurabot. You never want to rely on both. So that's a very important thing to pay attention to. I also swapped over to using just a rare body armor because it's not that much more expensive than a tabula, and it's very easy to just get a 6-link body armor that has a resistance roll on it or two, and it makes the rest of your gear feel much better. Once you're in maps, you should be able to afford spending an extra, you just sell your tabula, and that's like extra 10, 20, 30 chaos to get something with resists. It'll make the rest of the character feel a lot better. We did lose the one with Evil Wheel. It's kind of a garbage life recovery wheel right now, so getting chaos res gets a little bit harder, but it's not like we have plenty of room in our gear to just fit those resistances in. On to the endgame version. This is where we make several changes to be more powerful here. First, we are running double cluster jewels. Instead of just one, now we're running 2. And the Spell Suppress is Lucky Mastery is absolutely amazing. It lets us drop the Instinct Wheel and still be at 93 to 95% spell suppression chance. This node, you can see, it gives us 20% spell suppress. Now, it may seem bad to not be at 100%, but anyone who tells you spell suppress has to be 100 or it's worthless just doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're talking about something in a completely different context. This character should have about 7,500 to 8,000 effective hit points, right? You, with your Aurabot, having the higher level purities that you'll have, you can see if I'll adjust it in the configuration setting here. I really wanted to itemize all of these configuration settings into the gear sets themselves, so you never have to go and configure here, but I just didn't have time. League start is quickly approaching, and just got to get it out so people can use it, right? It's a scale for next league angle, I'm afraid. But anyways, you have 7,500 to 8,000 effective hit points. With Soul Link from your Aurabot, that's multiplied by like 1.64. So you're basically running around with like 11 to 12,000 effective hit points very easily, if not more. Actually, it's closer to 13,000. Which means that there's not really any spells that will just one-shot you if you don't suppress them, other than things that just kill you outright. So because of the insane recovery we have with Ghost Dance, with the regen, especially since we're splitting the degen from Righteous Fire between our life and energy shield pools by using a corrupted soul, using the corrupted soul keystone, this is absolutely fine. You can obviously still adjust this to have 100% spell suppress if you want, but this is the way I think the character is the most generally powerful. The leech nodes are pretty crazy. We pick up instant leech as well as using, where is it? Yes, on this version, we're using Doriani's Lesson to get elemental damage leeched as life. So we are instant leeching both life and energy shield with this mastery. That's going to feel really good. We've prioritized getting extra life regeneration rate on some of our gear pieces. Actually, I think we have about the same amount, but because we're splitting with Corrupted Soul, like on this version, we have the same amount. Other versions prioritize it a little bit more. Let's go through this. Body armor and power charges, or body armor and charges. There's two options here. One, and I think this is the best overall option, is to use an elevated spell crit body armor with the endurance charge every second if you've been hit recently, Warlord mod. And this means that you don't need to spend 4 passive points on an Enduring Composure, right? Because a Jewel Socket's worth about 2 to 3 passive points, right? And then Enduring Composure costs 2 more. So it's about 4 or 5 passive points worth of cost to the build to run Enduring Composure. So this saves you those passive points. On the flip side, though, to use power charges, you need to use a Blood Rage with an Anomalous Blood Rage. Now, this gives you you don't need a level 4 enhance, it can be level 3, but you're going to want projectile speed anyway, so I just figured I'd put a level 4 there because it's well worth the cost eventually, obviously not necessary to get the build operational. But with a level 4 enhance, level 20 alt quality Blood Rage, you're getting 4% chance to gain a frenzy charge on hit, whereas a Redeemer body armor is giving you 10% chance to get a frenzy charge on hit. So you're ramping your power charges a little slower, but in exchange you get 4 passive points worth of power, and that translates to more projectile speed and crit multi. You can switch this around. You can just drop a medium cluster jewel, get Enduring Composure, and then instead of using the endurance charge, you swap over to one that gives you frenzy charge on hit. But it's personal preference. This is what I would do. I would do this even if you don't have the currency for Anomalous Blood Rage. It can be kind of expensive. You can just use a normal Blood Rage. Bosses are going to die anyways, and mapping, especially Delia mapping where you actually need more damage. Normal Blood Rage is plenty enough to get frenzy charges, So that's something to pay attention to there. We still do use a split personality. The Righteous Providence node is crazy for getting extra crit. It feels really nice. I removed the Hatred Watcher's Eye crit I removed the Hatred base crit Watcher's Eye because it's really expensive. When I put it in the build originally, those would go for like a couple X or a couple Divines, I guess the equivalent. But like this last league, they've been like 7-8 Divines for maybe even more for a well-rolled one. So we just elevate spell crit on our body armor. And then we use like an increased crit chance Watcher's Eye. You can get that from Zealotry or Wrath. They both have increased crit, and it's very easy to get increased crit on a Watcher's Eye with another mod that's really good. There's lots of great Watcher's Eye mods out there, so overall this is going to be much more currency efficient for the cost that you spend. And I think that's about it for the high budget version here. I want to say that unlike the Aurabot, which needs to completely switch the character around as you invest more currency because all of your aura reservation breakpoints change, so it's like a completely different version. As a baseline, you can just keep investing in this character. One thing you can do is get like a Sublime Vision for Purity of Elements. That means you'll have to drop your Blood and Sand setup, so you'll lose a little bit of proj speed, but it will give you 3 max resists, and then instead of anointing Prismatic Skin, you can anoint Longshot. That's those can be kind of scarce. They're not always easily accessible. You can also pick up Impossible Escapes. One really good one is Magebane. You can get this Duration Wheel, and you can get Spell Suppress. You can get the Profane Chemistry for 7% max life, which you would take. Impossible Escape on Imbalanced Guard lets you just allocate Prismatic Skin and Soul of Steel. That's 3% max res. Those are pretty expensive. Even one on Unwavering Stance still would let you allocate the 2%. I probably wouldn't use this one, but it's still a viable option in many cases. An Impossible Escape on Precise Technique lets you get Thick Skin for 10% life. You can get Entrench, Spell Suppress here, and you can get Freedom of Movement, along with Phasing on Kill. This one would feel pretty good too. You can craft body armor with more life, more energy shield. You can get like better Eldritch Implicits on all your gear. You could get Call the Brotherhoods with good corruptions. You could get jewels that instead of having life, projectile speed, and crit multi, you can just get a 4th mod, like a second crit multi mod. You know, there are lots of ways you can invest in this character without changing the way it's built. And something to note on the Nebulises, there were a surprising number of people who went out of their way to get Nebulises that had the 40% elemental damage implicit. Like if you pull up a Nebulus in Path of Building, the default implicit is just 40% LE damage because that's what a Void Scepter has. The only way you can actually get that implicit is by vendoring 5 Nebuluses to do the 5-for-1 recipe, and then it's still a Nebulus, but it's no longer synthesized. So it's kind of crazy to see a lot of people did that because that was what was in the guide, you know. I made a note here that Crit Multi is the most cost-efficient Nebulus implicit. You can get like 25 Crit Multi on a Nebulus that has good rolls. I've bought those for a Divine or 2 in past leagues very, very easily. But you should always prioritize getting, you know, the lightning cold damage per resist as high as possible because that's the stat that really makes this item so insane. One thing to pay attention to is that all of the versions of the build on the tree here, they say which Aurabot version you need to pair it with. If you try to switch to using Nebuluses while your Aurabot doesn't have higher aura effect on their purities, you will have a very, very bad time. So make sure that when you are going from like the budget in-game setup, you need to get your Aurabot at their in-game setup first before you switch over to this version. So just pay attention to that. I've labeled it, even colored it to hopefully make it easier to notice. I know a lot of people have made that mistake, not realizing how the progression works. Basically, you always want to get your Aurabot to the next version before you upgrade the carry. Aurabots carry the build. They are the real workhorse behind the power here, so always prioritize them. On to the Magic Find version. This has been massively improved this league. I've just made some adjustments that'll hopefully make it feel much, much better to play. As a whole, I think Magic Find Spark Inquisitor is the best go-to Magic Find carry in a duo for 90% of cases. I talk about it in the Tornado Shot Deadeye video if you want to go watch there a little bit more detail, but as a whole, the amount of power that you get just from playing Spark and being an Inquisitor is massive, so you can just get Magic Find gear and still feel very strong even without investing a lot. So, one thing that makes this build feel a lot better is Death Rush. I think it is absolutely worth dropping Eventers to pick up Death Rush. Move speed is a stat that the Inquisitor has a very hard time getting. And so the clear speed that Death Rush gives you is well worth the cost of losing a single Magic Find item. And we also use Bisco's Leash for Rampage instead of a String of Servitude. Rampage is a mechanic that I was absolutely underestimating before. the power that it gives you, like the move speed ramp, I think it's 50% move speed at 1,000 stacks. It just makes clearing your maps faster, right? So even if extra rarity is a little bit better for early uniques, this is just a much stronger item overall, and it also gives us strength and cold res, both of which we desperately need. Onto the amulet. We used to use a, I guess it's not in here anymore, in the PoB anymore, an ascetic, that, and then we would use a rare and a magic, or a magic and a normal item to get the quant and rarity from it. I think it's actually just way better overall to use a Shaper Amulet with Quant, or if you can find a good, like a Talisman that just has really good stats, you can do that too. Several reasons for this. One is outside of the first day or two or three of a league, rarity isn't really important, and you actually get more quantity doing it this way than you get more quantity doing it this way than using Ascetic. So the getting an actual helmet is absolutely massive for this build. Righteous Fire is a huge damage multiplier. To sustain Righteous Fire, you need to get life regeneration rate, and the only place you can really do that is, you know, on a helmet slot. So this, getting a rare helmet that gives us life, it gives us life regeneration rate, a little bit of rarity if you can get it, and chaos resist with attributes, it's absolutely massive. Because of all the Magic Find gear we run, we have a very hard time kind of putting together a functioning character that feels good to play. So it's well worth, in my opinion, the not running Ascetic, just to be a much more powerful character overall. Also, you know, we're at 21% Chaos Resist. That feels pretty bad to be at any less. Magic Find gear makes it very hard to get Chaos Resist, especially with the one with Evil Wheel gone. We do use a, we're using the same Watcher's Eye as the previous version. You just get increased crit chance. This does put you only at about 83-84% crit. You might actually have more from your Aurabot, since I think the Aurabot has a little bit more than what's in the configuration. But that's okay. You don't need 100% crit. You can always just use Frost Shield to cap your crit out if there's something that needs to be killed. It's best overall to not have to run increased crit strike support, because it's just not great. Like, you always want to transition out of that as soon as possible. So this meets a nice balance. We also prioritize Instant Leech just because it helps survivability on a version that's generally more squishy. Storm Rider gives us our power charge generation. Prismatic Heart helps a little bit with elemental resists. So yeah, this character should feel much better to play. And finally, the Simulacrum version. This is probably most improved, like from what it was before. Now, if you have currency, you should always switch to the Endgame version. The Endgame version is just much stronger. Even at doing Simulacrums, it's not even close compared to this version. What this is a point where once you have this, you should pretty comfortably be doing like Wave 30 Deathless. So this version, your Aurabot will run Hatred over Haste because the haste kind of loses out. So we'll cancel the haste mods here. We'll also down our purities and elemental resist to what they would be, because you won't have 240 with 240 aura effect with level 23 purities yet. So this version pairs with the budget in-game Aurabot. The point of this is to be an investment point between the budget endgame setup and the endgame setup for just normal play. Like if you're doing mapping or you're working towards doing feared, you want to reach the budget endgame setup on the carry and then stop. And then you just invest in the Aurabot until you get to the next breakpoint. But for Simulacrums, you can actually get a lot out of just using Annihilating Light and standing still pretty much. So I'll go through some of the improvements that this character has made. First, we're using a Thread of Hope. This lets us pick up Glacial Cage, which is just pretty good. Maybe you wouldn't want to run this. Maybe it's not that great. It's for Kosis and Omni, it should be well worth a point. It might be a little bit lower clear. You can play around with how it feels to you. Winter's Embrace gives us freeze duration, which is really nice, as well as 30% damage, Throat Seeker, and we pick up Whispers of Doom. This lets us run an Arcanist brand with Sniper's Mark, Tornado, and Enfeeble. This should help make you feel a lot better against Kosas and Omni, so you can hit really hard. We swap in Arctic Armor because you're standing still a lot. And one of the biggest differences of the Simulacrum version is we basically rely on Frost Shield to cap out our crit. Now, with increased duration support and the duration we have on the tree, Frost Shield lasts 23 seconds. So there's no reason to invest in crit farther. You're going to be standing still, so you just use Frost Shield to have an insane amount of uptime. This character should feel very, very good for farming Simulacrums. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. You don't need Anomalous Blood Rage here at all. I mean, just buy it if you can. I just wanted to put it in the PoB since it's worth picking up. If you just have currency to spend, basically Blood Rage just gives you frenzy charges because you're always going to be killing things anyways. You can see if we turn off Frost Shield, we still have a good surplus of regeneration. So we very easily still sustain Righteous Fire. Part of that is because we run a Ruby Flask, makes it feel a lot more comfortable, and we prioritize getting life regeneration rate both here and on our boots. I'll have to rename this item so it's not new item. But by getting life regeneration rate on our boots and our gloves, it feels very good to run Righteous Fire in Simulacrums. We also get lightning damage leached as life as an implicit on our gloves, combined with the leech wheel. That gives us life leech and energy shield leech, so it's basically life and ES on hit. And because you're hitting so much constantly, that will be another huge layer of recovery in Simulacrums. Let's see, what else do we have? Sigil of Power, nothing's changed. That it's pretty insane. Finally, we have the glove implicit. Same, you have to get freeze prolif. I mean, you don't have to, but it's ludicrously powerful, and you'd be stupid not to spend the currency to roll for it. So don't ignore the freeze prolif. It makes you go from like freezing enemies sometimes to pretty much stun locking enemies, especially at higher waves where you won't be one-shotting them. All right, that's about it for the versions. Like I said, this character is turned out really well. It's very powerful this patch. I wanted to talk a little bit about other Ascendancies. I would have done that before. I spent many hours theory crafting, Trickster, Assassin, Occultist, Deadeye, etc. Inquisitor is just the best. It's still just the best. It's crazy powerful. It's the smoothest to gear. It transitions really well into Endgame. The regen, the ease of running Righteous Fire, enabling not having to worry about shredding or penetrating elemental resists. It feels really nice, especially when you're doing maps that have LE resist rolled onto them, or invitations that might have that mod, or Simulacrum waves where they sometimes get absurd amounts of resist on certain monster waves. It's just still the strongest overall. The old long neck pantsless man is pretty hard to beat. Last thing to talk about is farming strategies with this character and duos in general. There are 4 strategies that you can approach. They all have their own merits. They're all good. The first one, and I think this is really underrated, is the do whatever you find fun strategy. Now that might sound a little stupid, but with the way the Atlas tree works, and with the way that you can just buy scarabs, you can pick any mechanic in the game just about. You plan out an Atlas tree, you pick up the nodes for it, you prepare a bulk amount of maps. I recommend you do like 20 to 50 at least. You doing a strategy in bulk is the #1 contributor to making more currency per hour, in my opinion. So say you like Metamorph, Abyss, and Heist. Weird combo, but if you wanted to, you could. You take the Atlas tree nodes, you prepare a line of maps to run, you get scarabs, and you just blast. You'll very easily make several divines an hour at like a hard minimum. It's basically impossible to do any less than that. So especially if you're new to the game or you don't know what to do, the bulk do whatever you want strat is highly recommended. The counterpoint to that, the sweatiest, I just want to make as much currency as possible, I'm playing a duo and I want to be extremely powerful, and then I want to leverage that power into making currency in a way that I would have a hard time doing on a solo build. For people like that, there's 2 options. One I think is a little bit better, and that's Simulacrums. Now, simulacrums, if you've done dozens or hundreds of them, they start to get very boring. But like I remember the first league where I was doing simulacrums where I finally had a character that could do them, and I was just getting my first taste of like in-game content and like the kind of profit per hour that you can make with that. That was very, very fun. You know, I spent like a week or two just living in the delirious simulacrum zone, you know. So to make currency in simulacrums, if you want to be extra sweaty, one note before I get into that. If you want to be extra sweaty, you can even like finish the campaign and go straight into heist. And then you just live in heist, running contracts. You do the Aurabot version that has a solo leveling character, so you can even be doing, you know, 2 heist roles at the same time, split. And then you just buy contracts like in bulk on TFT until you have like enough currency to gear your characters out and buy like, you know, a set of 4, 5, 6, 7 simulacrums to transition into that. You'll probably die on the first few a lot as you level up, you know, because heist doesn't give a lot of experience. But I know heist to simulacrums is something a lot of people do and find success with. One note for simulacrums is you absolutely need to be leveling gems for profit. You can do, it used to be that you could just buy whatever gem was meta, you know, like from Lily and Hideout, and then you level like 20 of those, and then you quality them, vol them, you know. That's not the way to go anymore. You want to spend time buying jewels that'll be the most profitable. So you can go to PoE Ninja, search for alt quality gems, and just buy and level them. Find the ones that have the biggest difference between, or that sell for the most at like level 20 compared to like what you can buy them at. Alt quality sparks are really, really good. That should be just a solid go-to. Those are always like among the most profitable alt qualities to level. A non-alt quality that's always good is the crit damage support. That's a good baseline. Alt quality arrogance is usually really good money. Yeah, you can check on PoB. Alt quality gems, based on whatever's meta, you know, will be among the highest profit per hour. You can also do like enlightens, just enlightens and powers enhances, etc. If you use like in Itziri's the Itziri axe, the big boy, the Vol axe that gives quality, you put that in the offhand if you want to level enlightens and powers. It's, you know, it'll be kind of an investment. It's an option you can do there too. Yeah, level gems, sell them, do it deliberately, spend time thinking about it. It'll be a huge contributor to your profit. The third strategy is to farm Feared. Seek and I did this for several leagues. Feared is really fun. It's a really cool fight. You won't be able to go from maps straight into Feared, probably. You'll want to do an intermediate step of farming invitations, Guardian invitations specifically. Doing like Shaper and Conqueror Guardian invitations are great. If you know the Cirrus fight, you can even run Cirruses themselves. They're typically really good profit early on. But the Die Beam and the puddles, like the dark red, like the red and black puddles that completely stop your regen, they're a bit of a skill check. You have to not stand in them, and you have to know how to avoid the fight. So it's a little bit hard to run Cirrus if you don't know the mechanics. Shaper is kind of a pushover, very easy fight. You just run in circles and his stuff never hits you. Should be basically insta-phasing him anyways. So if you're doing that, you can run the Shapers afterwards too, or you can just sell the sets in both cases. Guardian invitations, just buying the Guardian maps, running the invitations, selling the fragments, selling the Maven Splinters are extremely profitable early on, and even not just for pushing Feared, for all the versions of the build. If you're like really wanting something that's pretty simple to do and should be very consistent good profit, that's a great option. The Feared itself is pretty easy. I think there's very few, like as long as you have a built character, you can completely overcome any skill issue with just investing more currency. You just like one-shot them as they spawn. The fights themselves aren't too hard. So yeah, Feared is great, but make sure if you're doing Feared, you build up like a set. You don't want to like get a single Feared set and then be like, now we're Feared. And then you run the Feared set, you can get unlucky and not get big drops and you can lose your money. That feels awful. Run a previous strategy like Guardian rotations like I was talking about, or just whatever map strategy you're doing. Do that first until you have a set of like at least 3 or 4 or 5 full Feared sets. That's what I would recommend. If you're worried about variance or you're not sure how it'll feel, just do that, and then you very, very heavily mitigate the potential bad RNG outcomes of that. And so the final thing to do is Magic Find. I do think that the Spark Magic Find is better in most cases than the Deadeye Magic Find, especially that gets increasingly more and more true the less experienced you are. There's several strategies for Magic Find. Most of them nowadays revolve around the Strongbox Sextant that gives you 500% increased quantity of monsters. In his latest party comp guide, Snap has an Atlas tree and a strategy that's good to do. You basically live in Crimson Temple, Defiant Cathedral. You run the maps over and over again, and you click the boxes, and then yeah, it's pretty great, pretty good profit. Yeah, so that's the character, fully updated for Crucible League. Sorry it took so long to be released. It just the builds, they needed a lot of time to refine, especially because last league it was so rushed. I mean, we were absolutely exhausted the whole time throughout. We barely even managed to update the builds in time. You know, they still needed lots of improvements that we just didn't have time to do, you know? So this set of builds for this league, they're all very polished comparatively. They feel really good, really happy with the way they turned out. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for all you guys' support, just saying kind things in chat or supporting us over on the streams. We will be streaming on League Start. Our links to our streams are in the description. So if you want to stop by and say hi, yeah, check us out. So catch you guys later. Hopefully you all have an excellent Crucible League. I'm going to try to do a lot of content going forward from here on out, kind of considering content creation to be my job for a few months, just to see where that goes, you know, now that I'm not constrained by having to work and go to class or go to college. So yeah, catch you guys later. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.